Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Genuine APBT. On today's episode, I want to talk about two things. The first thing is I want to give an update on conditioning Zephyr. And the second thing is I want to talk about the famous "the dog makes the pedigree" statement. Okay, here we go. So the first thing is I want to ask you to forgive me because I've been promising for a few months now that I was going to condition Zephyr in about a 12-week conditioning program. And I had started to do that, but like I mentioned in another video, I had some other priorities that I had to take care of that were necessary. And I caught COVID, and it was a little bit serious. I didn't end up in the hospital or didn't have a problem with my lungs or breathing or anything like that. I'm not trying to make less of it and say that it's not real and people don't get sick, they actually die. And so I want to be respectful of that. But in my case, in my wife's case, she caught it too, and my son-in-law, we were fine. It wasn't any worse than just a bad flu for me, but the lingering symptoms that I have is a pretty bad cough still. I hope I don't cough here in the video. Excuse me if I do. And really bad fatigue to where it was just going out and grabbing something from my car and walking back in. I was extremely fatigued. I felt like I had ran in college competitively, and it felt like I had ran 10 miles. And so, I'm still getting over that. So I still have a little bit of a cough, and some of the fatigue is still hanging around. So for those two reasons, I wasn't able to continue conditioning him. But I'm going to begin here. I'm hoping to do it here in the next couple of weeks. So maybe at the end of this month, beginning or middle of next month, we'll start again fresh from there and go on a 12-week. Now, if you notice here in the video, he's just in the front yard, and you might notice that he's got a couple little hives on the left or the right shoulder, I forgot, but it was because he got bit by a spider. I actually found the spider and killed it. So keep an eye on your dog's surrounding, and I go back there several times a day, but it is impossible. The dog's outdoors, and this property, for some weird reason, has always had black widow spiders, and so it was a small one. It wasn't full grown. I don't really know how venomous, or is it more venomous when they're little or something like that. I don't know if it's like rattlesnakes, but in any case, I found it, got rid of that, and I clean his surroundings every day, every single day. So anyways, if you look at Zephyr here in the video, you can see that even though I have not worked him out and conditioned him, he is still in very good shape, even though this is the most out of shape that my dogs ever get. They don't ever get bigger than this, but he's still in good shape. His stomach is still pretty, he's pretty fit, he's healthy, and I attribute that to good thought out nutrition. In our case, that's good balanced raw feeding. So if you keep your dogs fed well, even if you don't have an opportunity to work them out like you'd like, you will most likely get good results like this, and your dogs will not be overweight and obviously obese. I hope none of you have obese dogs. That is extremely dangerous for them, and what you're doing in essence is shortening their life. The second thing I want to talk about in the video is the famous term or the famous saying that the dog makes the pedigree. And before I even get started on that, I want to just put out a little disclaimer. I'm not trying to put anybody down for saying that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, especially if you feed and you look after your dogs. They're your dogs, and whatever you want to say, that's fine. Everybody has their own platform on their own channel, but I think we can agree to disagree on some things and learn from one another. So what I like to say about that is it seems like it's been kind of popular to say that the dog makes the pedigree. But if you look at it in a literal sense, that's not completely true. The dog never stops being made up or put together by the pedigree that is attached to him. And I understand why people say that. I think on the one hand, they don't want to be part of the irresponsible type of breeding, or the one side or the one camp that says, hey, I don't really observe the traits of the dogs or the family of dogs that I have. And all I do is breed 100% according to pedigree. And if I'm satisfied with the generations of pedigree, or the generations that are in my pedigree, that's fine. And I'm going to breed like that. And I understand there are some people that do that. I don't think it's a lot, but there might be some. I don't know of any, but I'm sure there's some. And I think in trying to stay away from that type of breeding, and people are kind of fatalists, and so they'll swing the other way, and they'll say, you know what, the dog makes a pedigree, the dog makes a pedigree, it sounds good, but that never really happens. Let me give you an example. If you have a litter of puppies, and 2 puppies are carrying the traits that you desired and that you believe that the pedigree that you have historically has been carrying, and you're trying to preserve the breed by continuing to better on those traits. And let's say 6 puppies, let's say it's an 8 puppy litter, and 2 puppies are good, and 6 puppies maybe had one of the 3 or 4 traits that you're looking for, or maybe they had a couple, but they didn't have the 3 or whatever traits you want. They didn't have them, right? So those 6 dogs, it's not fair to say that the pedigree doesn't make them, because they are still bred exactly the way the pedigree describes. It's better to say the dog that's standing in front of me is not a good reflection of the pedigree that I have in my hand. But to try to say that somehow, some way, the pedigree is non-existent, or the dog makes the pedigree, or you want to talk about the pedigree only if the dog is successful or the dog carries all the traits, it's not a good thing. You shouldn't forgive the pedigree that way. It's almost like if you're holding the pedigree at a pedestal and saying, this is a great pedigree, and if it produces bad pups, I'm going to just excuse the pedigree and pretend like it didn't exist, and then I'll say, hey, look, the dog makes the pedigree, the dog was no good, so let's not talk about the pedigree. That's not the way to roll. The best way to do it as a breeder is to look at the pedigree and study it and know the traits. Set yourself a goal on what you're trying to breed, and then go get it according to your pedigree. But don't overvalue the pedigree, but don't minimize the value of the pedigree. You have to have a good balance, and you have to be able to say, hey, look, this is the pedigree, and in this particular litter, the majority of the puppies did not carry those traits. But then be careful and still go back to the pedigree and go, how can I tweak it? How can I move it? How can I breed this or move that, or look at this particular dog that's carrying something? And then you only get that from being an observer and a studier of your pedigree. You can't just study the dog that's in front of you. You have to look at the dog with a filter of that pedigree, and then you'll be able to make a correct and honest assessment. But to simply say, because it's popular to say it, the dog makes the pedigree, that's not true. The honest truth is that the pedigree made your dog, and they can never be disconnected from one another. So just my take and my 2 cents on the term, the dog makes the pedigree. I wouldn't say that. I say focus on the dog that's in front of you and the pedigree. Both. Give them equal value. All right, guys. Well, like always, know them, love them, and raise them responsibly.